I rent a scooter here in Bali. It's costs like $100 a month or something like that, and it's kind of annoying. Like every month, because I pay through my Wise, I use Wise, and I was having some issue with the Wise, and I was basically telling him like, "Can you please get a Wise account? Because that'll make it easier for me. I can do directly Wise to Wise rather than like Wise to his Indonesian bank account." And we were kind of like fighting about this. And then he said something which was totally, I would never have expected this, like, young Indonesian guy who barely speaks English. And he's like, "Dude, do you have crypto? Can you pay me in crypto?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got crypto. Can you take crypto?" And he was like, yeah. Give me USDT or USDC. And I was like, "Oh man." I was like, "Sure, man."
Should have told me earlier.
Yeah, you should have told me this way earlier. Yeah. And I was just shocked. I mean, this is a guy who I guess don't judge a book by his cover, but I would not have thought that this guy was plugged into the ecosystem.
It's not an ecosystem thing. This is a classic use case of how the change happens.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Linker. I'm an investor, builder, and executive in digital assets. When I just first joined the industry 5 years ago, I had a lot to learn, and I found that I learned best by just having casual conversations with people actively working in the industry. I've had the pleasure of meeting some extraordinarily talented folks in that time, and the Coinversations podcast is my invitation to you to join me in these conversations so that we can both continue learning. Of course, nothing said by me or any of my guests is financial advice, and you must do your own research before making any investment decisions. Today, I'll be speaking with Raagulan Pathy, the founder and CEO of Kast. Many of you will know Kast if you're fans of the Coinversations podcast because they are our sponsor. Kast is an incredibly innovative stablecoin credit card, payments card company. I've wanted to have Raagulan on for a long time, so I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Here we go, Rags. Raagulan.
How are you, my man? How's things?
I'm good, man. Life is good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm based out in Australia for the next little while. Enjoying my time down here with the team.
With the team?
Yeah, we have quite a few people down in Australia. So I've been doing the crypto roadshow for the last few months along with everyone else. So now it's time to put my head down and make sure that operationally we're running as smoothly as possible. And we have a lot of our core operations, including like finance and treasury and even the heads of our customer service out here in Australia. So yeah, it's good to spend time with the team for a while.
Very nice. And where in Australia are you guys?
So I'm in a place called Burleigh Heads, which is like a beautiful surf spot, one of the best surf spots in Australia. It's sort of part of the extended Gold Coast, but also sort of 45 minutes north of Byron Bay, which I'm sure a lot of people know. And so, yeah, it's winter out here, but it's like 22 degrees, clear blue skies every day.
Beautiful.
A bit cold in the morning, but very ideal.
Beautiful. And do you surf?
I wish. I wake up every morning because I'm right on the beach and I look at the surf and I'm like, I really need to learn to surf. But, much like golf and many things, it's one of these things where you have to have consistency and practice to break the back of it. So maybe I will try. The water's a bit colder than in the summer, so I don't know how much that motivates me, but we'll try.
The big one for me in terms of learning new athletic skills is paddle. I realize that I feel like I'm the last person on earth not to paddle, and so I've been trying to join some paddle games. There's some guys here in Bali that play paddle, but they won't let me play until I learn how to play. So I got to find a coach and learn how to paddle before I can start paddling socially.
Well, I know there's a bit of a thing between paddle and pickleball, but we just got all these brand new Kast branded pickleball rackets.
Oh, nice. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I'd love to have one of those. Cool. So Rags, we of course know each other through the Singapore crypto scene. I remember, I think my first time meeting you or hearing about you, you were kind of known as the circle guy for a long time.
Yeah.
which is, I think, part of the reason why you're probably in a good mood this week. But we'll come back to that. But let's just start at the beginning. For anyone that doesn't know you or doesn't know you well, tell us a little bit about Raagulan. Just the man.
Yeah, for sure. Let me get through the personal side and then, where I'm from, and we'll talk about the work stuff. So, I was born in Sri Lanka way too long ago. And then I moved to Australia when I was like 5 years old and grew up in Australia, mostly because of the civil war in Sri Lanka at the time in the 80s. Especially Sri Lankan Tamils left Australia, UK, Canada, US typical spots where they went, along with other parts of Europe. And so I grew up in Australia. And then for the last sort of like 25 years, mostly lived outside of Australia in a whole bunch of countries. Obviously Singapore the last 12 years, but also the UK. But then a whole bunch of other more interesting places as well, such as I lived in Nigeria for a couple of years. Avid traveler, so been to more than 100 plus countries. So yeah, a mix of both developed world and developing world, and that sort of like really set me up for a lot of things that I want to do in life that interest me, including things like stablecoins and crypto. Because as much as they are fun for shitcoin trading, there's actually like a real world use case for them as well, and that's sort of why I've doubled down on stablecoins over the years as well. So yeah, I've been in Singapore for the last 12 years, but split my time a little bit with Australia and other places as well. Obviously, running a bit more of a global company now, a lot more global travel. From a work perspective, obviously the founder and CEO of Kast. Kast been just coming up to our first birthday since launch at the end of this month, end of June. So been doing that for a year. Before that, I set up and ran Circle for Asia for 2.5-3 years or so, and that was wild. And before that, mostly a career in tech. So worked at Zoom, worked at Facebook, worked at AWS, very, very early days.
Very cool.
Over the last decade. And prior to that, I had set up my own company as well in cloud infrastructure. So I'm a mix of like finance guy and tech guy, which basically makes you into a crypto guy eventually. Anyway,
yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, perfect. It's where it all converges. Dude, there's so many things that you have just mentioned that I want to dig deeper into, but I want to start with Nigeria. So you lived in Nigeria for how long?
2 years. I think when I first landed there, I'm trying to think, I was just shy of my 23rd birthday. And so I was like, I left Australia. I went to learn what's called Unix or Solaris, and Unix is like a tech platform. Actually, most Mac OS is built on Unix, and then was working in the US and UK. And then I was like out skiing and got a random call from a recruiter saying, "Hey, we're building a telco. South African company's building a telco in Nigeria. They only got like 500,000 telephone lines and like 140 million people at the time. Would you like to do it?" And of course, when you're like 22 or 23, you're just like, okay, I'll try my hand at anything, no matter how crazy the place sounds. But of course, gave me a bunch of US dollars and tax-free money, and so I didn't care about safety or security or any of those other things. I was like, yeah, let's do it. It's actually probably one of the most transformational things I've done in my life, because it's just building telco systems from the ground up. And time when the country so badly needed telco. I actually look at it very similar to stablecoins, because a lot of places don't have banking infrastructure. That's really good. And so ultimately, a lot of the places I've done my life are infrastructure in one way or another, whether it's telcos or whether it's money or others. And so in that instance, it was telco because people needed to communicate, and now it's money because people need to move money. But it's all basic human infrastructure that people need to live every day, right?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Actually, I worked with somebody. So my operations guy at BitMEX and later at XD Academy came from the telco space, and I hired him just because I knew he was a talented operations guy. But in working together, he had no crypto experience, didn't own any crypto personally or anything like that. But in working together, he used to share with me, he's like, there's actually a lot of parallels between crypto and telco.
Yeah.
The way that the infrastructure is sort of being laid out and stuff. And then of course, like the Solana founder comes from that background as well.
Yeah.
Did you know that
I mean, ultimately, like, yeah, they're all networks, right? Like, if
yeah,
you
yeah.
one's, so you're laying out, networks which are connected with each other. So anything that's networks, whether it's the internet, whether it's telco, whether it's the blockchain with validators, they're ultimately things
Mhm.
speaking to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Obviously, you have an encryption layer, and you've got obviously finance in crypto, but ultimately they're still networks, right? So
yeah, that's super interesting. That could be a whole nother topic for another time. Okay, incredible experience. So 2 years in Nigeria, working in telco. We don't have to go through the whole. I guess you've done so much interesting stuff recently. I want to get to, but in hearing about your work experience, one thing that does strike me is not just the geographic diversity, but you've been involved in a lot of successful stuff early, right? Like, of course,
mm,
Facebook is huge now, but I think it wasn't that big when you were there. AWS the same. So you've kind of had that ability. It sounds like you've had that ability for a while to be able to identify growth areas. Is that fair to say?
I would say it's like two things. I think one is the growth area part, but the second part is just finding stuff that's interesting and transformational. It takes people a long time to see something, and often they see it when it's like obvious and it's already there. But I've got a pretty inquisitive mind, so I'm always like trying to figure out, well, when is it going to get to some? In particular, I like things when they're going from like it's a technology and it's gone through the early adopter phase, and then it's about to go into this huge like mainstream phase, which
Hmm.
can take several years, right? Even in stablecoins, it's like still only like a few single digit percentage people have stablecoins, right? And so even though they're like hot right now because of Circle's IPO last week, etc., I think for them to go mainstream, it's still going to take the next sort of 4 or 5 years. But I like being on that precipice when things are going from early adopter to mainstream, because I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. You also don't have to sit around waiting as long, right? Because if you're like
Hmm.
super, super early in something, like you could sit around. I mean, stablecoin is a classic example. They've been around like 8 years or 9 years now, maybe close to a decade, right? And so I've been in them for 4 or 5 years. And it's really interesting if they're there early, but there's a long run up where you've got to wait until it hits this like inflection point.
Hmm.
And so I like going to places when I think that it's about to really hit that inflection point or a little bit ahead of that. And so I think, yes, I like growth companies, but I also like seeing technology that goes mainstream because, it suddenly becomes very useful for a lot of people.
But I guess what's interesting to me is how do you determine, because there are, you've made so many good calls. Did you just get lucky, or do you have some kind of way of
No,
identifying?
well, I've actually got this like model, this 25-point model on like how change happens, etc., which I used to run through with like literally hundreds of companies on assessing whether they're worth investing in or whether they're worth actually moving to. Everything from like, is there a macro change? Does the company have a moat? Do they have some magic in terms of speed of execution and all these other pieces as well, right? So there is some method to the madness. It's not like completely like let's just keep throwing a dart at it. But the base is that I always try to look for, is there a broader macro trend that's changing that is a huge tailwind to whatever you're betting on, right? And for in the case of, for example, AWS, it was the fact that technology infrastructure was really expensive for really long, but it was suddenly available in the cloud. And also, it was at the time when startups were starting to scale, VC was starting to scale, the internet companies were coming alive. So it was that sort of perfect mix as to why it would work and why you wouldn't be working in old school companies anymore.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's different. It's hard to map out because each one of these bets I've made are in different industries and different companies, and so yeah. But I spend a lot of time reading, a lot of time trying to understand, what's coming next, basically.
And this 25-point, um, you know, model that you use, is this something you came up with yourself, or you borrowed it from
Yeah,
someone?
No, I completely wrote it myself.
Hmm.
I created it first, I think, in like 2015. Yeah, it's probably like 8 years old now. I'll send it to you.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe I'll
Send it to
publish
me.
it online.
Yeah. 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 I'd be interested in seeing it for sure. You should definitely publish it, dude. Share the wealth,
I
man.
published it before. I just haven't published it for a while.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll publish it again.
Yeah. I'll take a look at it. That's super interesting. Okay. So then let's fast forward now to Circle. So you helped build the APAC business for Circle. What was that like?
It was interesting because it was like when I started at Circle was at the tail end. Obviously, I've been in crypto in terms of trading and just involved on a personal basis, but not actually run or driven a crypto company in a region, right? And so it was at the end of the. Obviously, I was participating personally in the 2020 2021 time period, but when I started at Circle, it was at the tail end of that bull market, and so we pretty much went. From when I started, we sliding into a bear market. I think in the first year we had like FTX and we had all the shit that happened. Luna, FTX, the works, right? So that was a bit of an interesting time. And then of course subsequently Circle also had its own issues with SVB going broke and the DPEG, and so it was a lot of it was a challenging time where people were like, it was a bear market, so people were like bullish on everything. I think the only good thing that Circle or the stablecoin issuers, including Tether, had to their side was that interest rates were high. So suddenly they're making a lot of money. Versus actually in the bull market, interest rates were zero or near zero. So that you could have like $50 billion worth of stablecoins, but they're only making like 0.1% interest on them. So it's not that interesting, right? And so yeah, but now stablecoins are all the rage. Like everyone wants to be a stablecoin now.
Why? What's creating that? What's creating that trend?
I think people have finally woken up to the fact that stablecoins are just going to be huge. The opportunity is just so massive because it's a unifier. I'm just talking about the US dollar alone. It's a unification of banking rails in the US, Swift overseas, and all the informal dollars. That combined, like M2 money supply in the US is 22 trillion. Everything combined might be 40, 50 trillion. If you have one layer that sits across the top of that and unifies it all instead of it being all fragmented, that's just a mega opportunity, and then it's essentially money on the internet. So you've got probably 5-6 billion people on the internet. So just the sheer TAM of it is just massive, right? Like billions of people, pretty much like half the money of the world could all get converted into stablecoins. That'll take a very long time, but from an opportunity basis, there's not really much bigger than that. That's as big as it gets, pretty much.
Yeah, for sure. And what are people using stablecoins for currently?
So I would say that there's essentially two camps. One is that the same person might use it for both. So obviously there's the trading use case. People use it to trade on centralized exchanges and dexes, so spot, derivatives, etc. And then the second one is for payments as well, right? So people, especially in emerging markets, use it for sending dollars. Instead of sending dollars to each other because banks are too hard, they just send it on chain to each other. And so yeah, that's essentially the two biggest use cases.
Yeah,
a replacement for sending money between banks and trading.
Which use case do you think is more interesting or has more potential?
The trading one has had been the mainstay for the last 10 years, but I think replacing global banking rails in various forms with stablecoins is more interesting long term. Ultimately,
yeah,
it's bigger.
I think that's interesting, and I obviously you know way more about this than I do, but that would be my sort of impression as well. And I'll share a funny story. So I hold some stable coins, and primarily for trading, primarily, if I want to go back to dollars from whatever shit coin or whatever I'm trading. And I'll occasionally do some payments, with it, with other crypto people. If I owe some money or something like that, sometimes it's easier to pay with a stable coin. But my first time using a stable coin with like a proper vendor or something like that was quite recently, where I was I rent a scooter here in Bali, and it's cost like $100 a month or something like that, and it's kind of annoying. Like every month, because I pay through my Wise, I use Wise. If you're
Mhm.
familiar with them, and
Yeah.
I'm paying the guy in Wise, and I was having some issue with the Wise, and I was basically telling him like, can you please get a Wise account, because that'll make it easier for me. I can do directly Wise to Wise rather than like Wise to his Indonesian bank account. And we were kind of like fighting about this. And then he said something which was totally I would never have expected this, like, young
Yeah.
Indonesian guy who barely speaks English. And he's like, dude, do you have crypto? Can you pay me in
Mhm.
crypto? And I was like, yeah, I
Mhm.
got crypto. You take crypto? And he was like, yeah. Give me USDT or USDC. And I was like, oh man. I was like, sure,
Should have
man.
told me earlier.
Yeah, you should have told me this way earlier. Yeah. And I was just shocked. I mean, this is a guy who like yeah, I mean, I guess don't judge a book by his cover, but I would not have thought that this guy was plugged into the ecosystem. In any
Yeah,
case,
well, it's not an ecosystem thing. This is a classic use case of how the change happens, right? Because so you've got USDC or USDT, you send it to
mm-hmm,
him. You're like, no way this guy's going to take it because he's going to have to convert it to rupiah so he can
mm-hmm,
spend it. But if you're in Bali and there's enough people with crypto around Bali, and so if he's like, hey, I can take this USDC because I can off ramp it, but also, by the way, all the things I need to pay for, like say he needs to go and buy more scooters, right?
mm-hmm,
And if the next guy is like, hey, I'll take USDC as well, and that guy buying scooters is buying it from, let's say, China, and so the people in China are like, yeah, I'll take USDC too,
mm-hmm,
and they need to buy parts from Vietnam, and they're like, yeah, we'll take USDC. So as soon as that chain becomes active and everyone's taking the same currency, and they're like, oh, it's as good as dollars, but I don't have to deal with my shitty banks,
mm-hmm,
then it's like, as soon as you hit that inflection point, which we're not at yet, but we're slowly inching towards,
mm-hmm.
as the connections get made, man, that is when things go wild. And that's
Yeah.
probably like, in my estimation, 4 to 6 years away. But when that happens, that's when people are like, fuck, there's no point like off ramping to a bank. Like I can use this with anyone. Like I can
Yeah.
just, everyone accepts it.
I can see that. Yeah. And it is literally such a better experience, because I remember when I first discovered Wise, I was so excited because the exchange rate is much better than like typical bank to bank transfers. And in
Mm,
many cases, it's often simpler as well. But
yeah,
it's still not. I mean, it's kind of annoying, right? Like,
yeah.
I have to pay now from my Singapore bank account to Wise. Then I have to confirm the transaction on Wise. Then I have to input all the data for the person I'm transferring to, which is like a name, an account number, a bank, and then sometimes they ask me some like some basic like KYC like type questions depending on which account I'm sending to. Um, it's funny how that is like considered the like that was the better experience, when it came out, and it's
Yeah.
still like quite annoying. Like I guess we
Still shit.
it's
It's still
shit. Yeah.
shit.
It sucks. Yeah. Whereas,
This
I find out that this guy's using crypto, and I'm like, "Oh my god, dude, send me your wallet address." Right? I pop that
or
in.
he's gonna pull up like a QR code and you just scan it, put in the
Done.
amount, press send, done.
Done. Yeah.
That
And then you just don't go back. You just, why would you do it the other way? Yeah, so cool. Cool, man. So okay, so tell us. So you were at Circle, and then obviously this led into the Cast opportunity somehow. Tell us about that. Like leaving Circle, discovering Cast. What was that like?
So for me, firstly, like Circle was amazing. Like the leadership there is great. Jeremy Allaire is like, I can't speak highly of enough of him. Like I like big thinkers, and Jeremy. I was at Amazon for a long time, and Jeff Bezos talks a lot about think big. And Jeremy is definitely in that camp. He thinks super big, right? So much so that he almost doesn't care about the little details in the short term, because he's
Mm.
just like, well, you're just not thinking. If you're worried about these little things, you're not thinking about the really, really big things, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's played out in the IPO, where you're seeing like people are getting on board with the, hey, this is big. This opportunity is more than big. This is huge, right? And but the one thing was that if you're in a senior executive role, and I was one of the most, senior people outside the US for Circle, it's also like it comes with the perks of mostly flying business class, not always. It comes with, nice hotels and great conferences and going to Davos and all those things. And Circle was very generous in terms of all the opportunities I had to meet, people from all parts of crypto, all parts of banking, regulators, everything, right? And the support that I got was great. But the only downside to it is that it comes with a couple of things, and that is that firstly you're always on,
Mm.
and but that's okay because in a startup you're always on anyway. But the second thing is just the sheer amount of travel I had to do. The travel
Mm.
was a lot. I was probably out 150 plus to 200 days a year in travel. I'd often do dozen, not like 10 or 20 countries in a year, like even more than that. And I'm not going to blame Circle for it, because like they're also like, hey, look, if you want to travel less, you can. It's just that I know myself. I'm like, if there's a mission to be done, I was
Mm.
looking after Asia, and then I was looking after some other teams as well. But I want to see it done properly, and often that means you're going to fly and get these relationships done in person. And so after like 2.5 years or so, it wasn't so much that nothing wrong with Circle. Circle had, obviously its issues, DPEG, whatever, but it was on its way back. It was just I was cooked.
Yeah,
I was
fair enough.
literally cooked. I was like, hey, like, and then you just I think anyone's been in like a role where you got to travel a lot, like your health goes down, you don't have time to exercise, you're not eating right. I'm not getting any younger. So first was like, okay, I've got everything out of this opportunity. I could stay here for a couple more years, but also like it's a good time to hand this over. I've taken it from 0 to 1 in Asia. It's a good time to hand it over to others. And then I was gonna actually do nothing. I was like, let me just go and chill. I was like ready to hit the road of like semi-retirement. I pretty much like retired from that role. But then, of course, I was like, there's this thing where stablecoins are not done. We need to, what are we going to go and build next? And I just met a bunch of interesting people that, could bring it together, including the likes of like Sam Kerins and a few of the others as well who are on the team. And we just had an opportunity to build something. And it started off as something really simple, which is just like you deposit stablecoins and you spend it on a card. Really, really simple, right? And then it took a life of its own. It started taking off,
Yeah.
and then I had started building a much bigger vision, which is where I'm at today, which is that we're going to build the world's largest consumer bank, and it's going to be built on top of the stablecoin layer, and it's going to be available to people in more than 150 countries. It's going to be both have off-chain, hybrid, so you can deposit cash and receive cash yourself or from third parties in 150 plus countries. But you could also have an on-chain version of that as well, and you would have everything you get from a bank, like cash, savings, card, potentially in the future loans, investments, everything. And we're probably like 3% of the way into that. We've got a long way to go, but so far it's been very successful. We're in month 12 now of Kast, and touch wood, one thing that we've been lucky with is it's grown every single month. Some months have been crazy, it's been 100%. Some months have been single digit percentages, but it's grown every single month for 12 months straight.
Grown by what metric?
Oh, just in terms of revenue and users and everything else,
Mm.
right? So every month has grown. So even though crypto has gone up and down in that last 12 months, you've had like boom parts and you've got bust parts. It keeps growing, which means that like even it grows slower when there's no crypto boom going, but it just shows the demand for stablecoins, the demand for a banking-like experience built on top of stablecoins is just so big.
Yeah,
That
it's
people
resilient.
really
It's resilient to the the
Yeah,
fluctuations. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
that's a great sign. So where are you seeing most of the growth currently, and how are people using Cast? What does the typical Cast customer look like, and what does the typical Cast customer do?
Yeah, so today the typical cast customer is either a crypto native person who does trading, who maybe makes some wins and wants to go and spend it, so they use the card. Or the second person is someone who's from an emerging market like LATAM and parts of Middle East and Africa and certain parts of Asia, where they need stable coins because their local currency or the movement of money is not great, and they want to use a card to go and buy things from overseas, right? And so just access to that is like a huge unlock for them.
Mm.
But we're also, because we've introduced the ability to deposit and send money as well, people are using it effectively as a bank alternative. I mean, you've got Wise, so we're essentially moving it into some sort of replacement for Wise, but built with stablecoins underneath. So you'll
Mm.
be able to send cash in and pay out. And so now we're cutting into the globally remote, people who, are remote worker living, I don't know, somewhere in Africa, and let's say they're living in Kenya, and they want to receive money from the US because they've got a client for their graphic design business, and so that now they can open an account in the US and someone can pay them, and they'll just receive the money. And it looks like dollars, but it's actually stable coins, and then they've got a card from which they can spend it, and soon they'll be able to also transmit that money to their local bank account in Kenya or whichever country they may be in
Mm.
as well. So it's
This,
becoming a full bank replacement.
yeah. Speaking of Cast customers, this feels like the perfect time to hear from our sponsor, which happens to be Cast. The future of spending crypto is here. Meet the Cast Solana physical card, your gateway to seamless instant spending. Use your crypto instantly, no spend limits, and instant ATM withdrawals. Tap with Google Pay, Apple Pay, and shop at over 140 million merchants globally. Supercharge your rewards. Shop luxury, fly first class, or even buy a supercar with Cast. No limits, no restrictions. The physical Solana card is here. Secure yours today for just $100. Scan the QR code now and step into the future of crypto banking with Cast. So, Rags, we were just talking about how Cast has evolved from just a stablecoin card to really becoming like a full neobank type of operation. What are you doing that is different from the current operators in the space, like a Revolut, for example? What is Cast offering that would be more compelling to customers than what the other neobanks are doing?
So I think there's two issues with the other neobanks. Both Revolut and Wise service people in about 40 to 50 countries, but they're limited because they're run on fiat, and so they're limited by the licenses of the countries they can operate in. Whereas because we build on stablecoins, we can service people in well over 150 countries, right? And so that's a big difference, because even though it might be okay for you or me because we live in Singapore or have had residency to get Wise, like a lot of people in other countries in Southeast Asia or Africa or LATAM can't get Wise, right? Or can't get Revolut. And so it's a huge unlock in terms of having a banking style experience for those people, right? So that's one very big thing. The second thing I think is just, a little bit about the user experience of crypto, like just what you talked about earlier. And probably don't need to repeat it, but essentially just being able to send people money much faster than via crypto rails, stable coins via crypto rails, just is much easier compared to sending it via the banking network as well. And so we think of these companies as great companies, but they're built on the old world rails, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each Revolut and Wise are between 10 to 15 years old now, right? So they're not young companies. They're like middle-aged fintech companies,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Not as old as a bank, but they get like middle-aged now. And so what we have a chance to do is essentially rebuild this all from the ground up and start afresh.
Talk to me about, I guess I'm curious to know a little bit more about two things. One, maybe, and let's take it slow here and go one by one, but the two things I want to know about are kind of like the unit economics for Wise, for like a particular customer what the unit economics for a transaction look like, and then maybe connected to that, um, how it interacts with like different, because you talk about, some of those, I guess, would you call them like long tail, like countries that aren't like currently serviced by
Yeah.
financial institutions. And so if I'm in I don't know, what would be a good example, Kazakhstan or Uruguay
Nigeria.
or
Yeah.
Nigeria, sure. Like where I maybe I don't have, and I don't know a lot about banking in those countries, but it seems like, I don't have access to a great many options, right? But is there infrastructure there for taking card payments? If I'm in Nigeria, like how much do I need a card? Like, can I use a card?
I think Visa and MasterCard have done a good job of being able to be used everywhere. I think the issue is just more just the movement of money in the first place. There's often, just exchange rate controls and banking controls just sort of takes money. Like I think it's like, just sending money to some of these countries, and it varies country by country. It can just take weeks or just take a really long time.
Hmm.
There's also unfairness. They can ask you for continuously asking for documentation in some of these countries. You've got to either bribe someone or you've got to literally know the bank manager. So it's not a level playing field basically for
Hmm.
financial services. And that's what crypto does so well, right? In terms
Hmm.
of flattening that. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So let's say I'm living in Lagos. Um, I want to do any kind of normal like transaction. So obviously for like um payments, it makes sense that probably people would rather use US dollars as like a form of payment anyway, right? Like if I'm gonna send my buddy, if I want to send my buddy cash, a USD to USD payment over crypto rails, if they can accept it, works great. But I'm probably gonna have other use cases, like maybe that's not the way for me to pay. Like I go to a restaurant, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And we're pro
So yeah, so what will happen is that a lot of these people are working for overseas companies or earning money from overseas, right? So they want to get those dollars in. If they get it into naira, then it'll get converted, and there'll be a bunch of money taken from middle players, maybe 5-10% or more. And so you're losing money straight away. And then the second thing that's happening is that after you lose the money on the way in, you also exposed to naira's exchange rate risks, which
Mhm.
basically keeps depreciating, right? And so, for a whole bunch of reasons, you want to keep it in US dollars. You also may or may not trust your bank sometimes as well to keep large amounts of money, because once you've got the money in there, they may make it really hard for you to get it out. Governments may do various things, so there's a whole bunch of trust issues as well. By the way, I'm not picking on Nigeria. This
Sure.
is in like 100 plus
It's many
countries. So
countries
anyone,
have this issue.
yeah,
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 sure. Yeah, of
yeah, yeah,
course. Yeah. Almost
and
like more countries that have this issue than don't, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Three quarters of
yeah.
countries have this issue.
Yeah.
Maybe one quarter don't. And so then when someone wants money, so I think if you're using it for small things locally, you might go, okay, let me go and change these US dollars or the USDC/T into my local currency
Mhm.
and put it in my bank account for the things that I need to do. But anything big, or anywhere that accepts like a Visa and MasterCard, you'd much rather put it onto a card and spend it and tap and pay it rather than actually, like, you basically just try to keep it in US dollars as long as possible,
Of course.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is my question, right? So like if if I'm going to pay for something with some normal tap and pay, which I assume is available in many places in Nigeria,
Yeah.
how's my exchange rate with Cast on an experience like that?
We just rely on the Visa exchange rate, right? And so, yeah, and then we charge like 2% on top of FX rate, which is pretty normal for most providers.
Mhm.
It's not the cheapest. It's basically, it's based upon a lot of the fees that we get from Visa. But yeah, we rely on Visa's exchange rate mechanism. Now, the reality is that sometimes they'll be able to get a better exchange rate. And in that instance, they'll go and take USDC or T to their local exchange or off ramp provider, and they'll be able to swap it and maybe get sometimes a black market rate, which may be 5 or 10% better,
Mm.
and they'll do that, especially for something that's a bigger transaction amount. But a lot of the times, if it's just like I don't know, $5 or $10, they're just like, oh, screw it, like I'll just tap pay, it's easier,
Yeah.
right? So it's
What?
just a convenience thing.
Yeah. What's it like working with Visa?
Visa is generally pretty good, but they're also, they're more network, right? And it's not just like when you provide Visa or Mastercard, you're also working with all the issuers and all the banks and processors and everyone else in between. So Visa's great, but it's a big global company with lots of rules and regulations and lots of countries to work with. But I think they're making excellent strides in terms of moving towards global, making crypto style cards available to people around the
Hmm.
world.
Do they have a view? Is your sense, do they have a view on this being like a really important growth area for them?
I think so, because ultimately, like, if you just take it from the point of view of like access to financial services, I think any financial services company can get on board with giving more access to people that need it. And so ultimately, this is what it's doing. So from just the most simple fundamental point of view, I think they're totally on board. But they have to also transverse a lot of rules and regulations in countries and partnerships, and it's very complex, right? Like operating the network that Visa has is super, super complex. Like I think people underestimate how complex it is, and frankly, what a good job Visa and Mastercard do in making it available globally.
How? So you guys partner with Visa, is that right? Not MasterCard?
We partner with Visa mostly right now, but we're also talking to Mastercard. Well, Visa's issuers right now, and then we're also speaking to Mastercard as well. I think most companies, when they go global, will have a mix of both. No different to if you go to your bank, your DBS or Citibank or whatever, that they've often got both cards available.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just curious because I think I have both a Visa and a MasterCard, and I think that they're fairly interchangeable. So I always wonder, like, from the business side, like, when do you talk to Visa? When do you talk to MasterCard? What's the experience like?
I think at this stage globally, they're pretty interchangeable. I haven't seen too many places where one's accepted and the other is not, but they have certain nuances as well. But yeah, both are pretty good. I respect both of them a lot.
What are the nuances that differentiate them?
Oh, it's just like, there might be more acceptance in one country of one
Mm,
or the other. And there's differences between how credit cards work and how debit cards work,
hmm.
how they deal with merchants. Man, we could spend like 10 hours on a podcast going through the nuances of Visa and
Mm.
MasterCard. But I think you're right. Like largely for most people, and even for myself, that
From the customer perspective,
they're
they're
interchangeable.
identical,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you shared sort of like a pretty grand vision of what you see Cast becoming in the future. I wish you the best of luck with
Yeah.
that. What is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? What is the thing that needs to happen next in order for you to take the next step in reaching that vision?
Yeah, I think the thing that we're trying to deliver next is our self-custodial version that allows us to offer more products. At the moment, because we're a custodial product, we kept it to a very simple payment style product where you can deposit and send cash and stablecoins, and you can spend it on a card. But we can't veer very far off that, simply because if you're custodial, we've got a lot of regulations we've got to take care of. We've got to think a lot about that, you try to service people in a lot of countries, so we've got to keep it really simple. We can't support things like stock trading. We can't support things like staking. We can't support even something simple like a yield-bearing stablecoin can be controversial in some countries, and so we have to play it like ultra safe. But that also eventually will mean that we'll limit how appealing we are to customers, and so I think in Q3 we're going to launch Cast X, which is a self-custodial version, but
Mm.
will allow you to hold and swap stablecoins, but also allow you access to not only hold and swap stablecoins, but also give you access to DeFi rates, potentially maybe in Q4 tokenized stocks,
Mm.
and so it'll become a little bit more like a fully fledged banking experience where you get access to a lot more things.
Mm,
So I think that will be important for us because it will start moving us forward faster, and it'll be a big unlock where it'll become appealing to more people. Because
mm,
frankly, like having stable coins or crypto and spending it is interesting to, and depositing and sending cash is interesting subset of people who really need it. But there's a whole bunch of people who've got banking already who are like, oh, I'm good. I think we could appeal to a wider audience with more products, and I think
mm.
that is ultimately what we're looking to build and deliver in Q3.
Yeah, very cool. I'm guessing you have because there's got to be a lot of like legal, regulatory, and compliance.
Tons.
Yeah. So that's probably
We've got
how.
like 20, I think like 20% of our org is like legal and compliance, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Do you feel like we're in an environment now though where um the time is right to push more on stuff like this?
I mean, last year when the US was effectively out of the crypto market, man, it's so weird. It was just like 6 months ago. It feels like it
I
was
know.
forever ago. But
Yeah.
it's effectively checked out of crypto. Like it's really hard for the rest of the world to run forward while the US is like going the other way, right? Like it or not, like US being you know, on the front foot with crypto as it is today is just so good for the rest of the world because
Mm,
they're just like, well, we've got to follow, and it puts pressure on them, right? Otherwise, you have like the Europeans and others writing, bullshit legislation that prevents everything till the cows come home, right?
mm-hmm.
But having the US on the front foot on crypto legislation and being pro crypto, I think it definitely makes it the right time, not just in the US, but globally, so people can try things. And if some government is just like, no, we're against it, it's like, okay, cool, but the US is for it, and therefore a lot of the world is for it now. And so if you're not for it, we'll just find somewhere else to go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when the US is against it, then it's like most governments are like, well, maybe we should be against it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, yeah, absolutely, it's the right time. And I think, people talked about crypto glory early years where people made 1000x on Bitcoin or whatever. But I think the real glory years are the next 10 years where it really goes mainstream.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a risk? One of the things that I wonder about is because there's definitely this push right now to
Mm.
release new products, new business models within crypto, and I see things. I don't know how to put this. I want to put this as like gently, but as honestly as I can. Right? Like
See
you
a lot of bullshit. That's
but not just bullshit, but you see things coming out right now, and it's not like bad. Like I support it, but you see things coming out right now that you just would not have seen a couple years ago. Like nobody would have done this a few years ago, And I love it
Give us
because
an example. Don't cop out of it.
I will know. I would say that I'll tell you this. I think a lot of the yield stuff,
Yeah.
the yield
Yeah.
strategies and stuff, like you just wouldn't have seen this a couple years ago, man. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just too close to. It's just I mean, come on, man. Like to the SEC,
Yeah.
like yeah, but I think it's great. Like I think I believe in financial freedom. I believe that people can handle this stuff, and I'm not like one of these hardcore Mad Max libertarians, but like I believe that we should have more financial freedom, and that technology is offering us fantastic options. And I think people can handle it is the other thing. I think this idea that we have to protect the consumer at all costs is like infantilizing.
Yeah.
But that said, there is a part of me that kind of wonders if there's going to be some kind of a rude awakening if the U.S. ultimately ends up going in a different direction. It's not inconceivable to me that maybe the current administration is not in power, in after the next election cycle, and there is some sort of kind of revenge administration, and that one of the things that they target is to say, hey, we're going to roll back the position on crypto, right? And then you have all these companies that have emerged and matured, to some extent in this environment that may suddenly find themselves in a difficult position in the next environment. Is that something that you think about?
I mean, we've 6 months into 4 years. We've got 3.5 years to go.
Sure, yeah. That's a tomorrow problem, right? Yeah.
And not only that, I think the thing is that, like, firstly, crypto is like a cockroach, right? Like, you just can't kill it, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, the thing is that in that time, I think the cat will be out of the bag sufficiently, and the benefits of crypto will finally be really evident, so that people will go, okay, right.
Yeah.
Like, even if I think there's always going to be an element of people pulling it back a little bit, but like, we would be so far down the path by that time that I think it would be positive.
Yeah.
And then people go, oh, if and this is what happens between governments, right? I saw it when I spoke to a lot of regulators. Like, it's like, okay, well, if you want to cede it, like if you had the lead, and if you want to give up the lead, then there's the next person who's ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I love Singapore, as you can see. I live there. You can see my background, but you're seeing that a little bit in Singapore. Like, Singapore's taking a step back, and others are like, all right, cool, you take a step back, we'll take the lead then.
Mm-hmm.
Singapore's got its own reasons for doing that, but which are fair for its own situation. But that's the way competition works between governments. If one takes a step back, another one will step forward, and so I think we're good. I think we're good here.
Yeah. Are there jurisdictions that you feel like are still? I guess I'm thinking about Europe, to be specific. Like, what's happening in Europe? It seems like they are, and I'm not an expert on this, so educate me. But like, my impression is that Europe is quite like behind the ball at this point in terms of what they're doing with MiCA and.
Yeah, I think the thing is that Europe is not one country; it's a lot of countries, and so there's different countries interpreting things in different ways and moving at different pace. And so, mostly I think MiCA and others are not great, the rulings. But the one thing is that because of it, it's allowed crypto and banking to work together a lot more. So in that way, Europe's getting a lot further ahead, right? And so you can actually, with open banking standards and in Europe plus MiCA, it's allowing money to flow between fiat and crypto a lot more. And that way, Europe's doing a good job. I'm not so sure on the rest of it. But, the thing is, like, most Europeans I know, if they want to trade, they trade anyway.
Sure.
They just work around the rules.
Yeah.
It's not I feel a lot of the rules in these countries are set up to protect the masses, so that if something goes wrong, government's like, see, I told you, we protected you guys, right?
Yeah.
But there's always going to be the people who want to do stuff, and they'll move countries, or they'll set up a VPN and trade, and there's no real stopping that. It's always going to happen.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the craziest stuff that you mentioned, like, my view is that, like, crypto's always had a bit of crazy, and that's kind of what makes it interesting. But at the same time, you can get carried away trying to do the newest, coolest thing. The thing with Kast is, like, we just actually do something really boring. We try to make it interesting for people, but we're building something that people actually need. That is kind of boring, but is needed. So, like, the opportunity and the TAM on it's so big. So I don't really get distracted with, like, all the short-term stuff. There's always someone who's gone from nothing to multi-billion-dollar FTV who's like the next hottest thing. But, you've seen it in crypto. They always go up, but then, a year or two later, or sometimes months later, they're down again. And then no one hears about them again, right? Like the coin market cap, the tokens going up and down, they're constantly moving up and down, right? So my view is just, like, ignore most of it and just keep building stuff that people need, and you'll figure it out. You'll end up in the right spot.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, cool. Rags, we're probably coming up on our time here. Is there anything else that you feel like is important that you'd like to share with anybody listening?
It's so much important when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, talk to us. What's on your mind? What do you
Well,
think
I'm,
about you? Because you know it's funny. You're an interesting guy. I'm enjoying this conversation with you, and I've always enjoyed our conversations. I'll share some my impression. Like Rags, like you're a very intelligent guy, and it comes across, like
I
it's
paid you, I paid you to say that, didn't
no, and I'll say no, he did not. Although we appreciate your sponsorship, of course, and it was very. That was very kind of you to step up. When I said like I want to keep doing this podcasting thing, and I'm actually I should absolutely say your support in this, Rags, like really
I?
really
Oh, good.
really means a lot. But no, I'm not getting enough to I'm not getting enough to
Smoke shit up my
yeah,
ass.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But no, but you're a very intelligent guy. You're very clearly like a very methodical thinker in the way you think about all this stuff. But I know that you're also I've seen you let your hair down a little bit before at times. I know you're a passionate guy as well, and I'd love to for you to expose a little bit of that passionate side to the audience now, and like just share with us like something that you think about or feel that gets you excited or makes you really feel something strong.
Look, to me, the thing is that the world is going to get transformed by stablecoins and probably Bitcoin. I think they're two big things. That's for sure going to happen, right? And the thing is that look, I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I don't really give a fuck about the money. I've got no interest in selling Cast or my shares in Cast. I've got no exit plan. Others are like, hey, how do I get rich off this? And, etc. I think the opportunity is literally $1 trillion opportunity. And I tell my VCs who are crazy enough to back it that this is fucking huge. Like it's really, really big. It's as big, you could build a whole new JP Morgan here. And if you don't believe that, then you're playing in the wrong game. I think the main thing is just like crypto's full of a couple of things. Firstly, it's full of haters. As soon as someone's starting to do well, I'm not talking about me, people often hate on it.
Yeah.
Versus often when people are doing well, I'm much more curious. It's like,
Yeah.
sometimes they're doing it because they're scammy. Sometimes they're doing it because they're building something legit. But I'm more curious about it than anything.
Yeah.
But the thing is also, it's just like, you got to call out a bit of bullshit as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think my general disposition in life is like, just don't give a fuck in terms of like saying my mind,
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that's going to happen? One day I'm going to die and people forget me. Guess what? Everyone dies and everyone gets forgotten, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I think it's just about building something that's amazing, that's going to change the world. And I really believe that. And I think it'll Cast will become worth way more than $100 billion, if you ask me, frankly. Wow. I think it could become $1 trillion company one day. But the reality is that I didn't give a fuck about it because I will donate pretty much all of it anyway. And I don't really, and maybe my life will get slightly better, but my life is pretty good right now anyway. And so that's not really the pursuit for me in terms of the money. The money is maybe a scoreboard because you end up on some list where you're richer than some other dude. But honestly, like, the world is like genuinely fucked in terms of how fragmented it is. And I'll just leave it on this point. I say this in a lot of, conferences when I speak. I'm a bit of a space nut as well. So if you go to space and you look back at the Earth, you don't see borders, you don't see races, you don't see people. It's all like bullshit that like people have conjured up, right? The fact that you're in Singapore and you drive 25 kilometers and then you're in Malaysia, that's a different currency, and you earn 1/3 as much as you do in Singapore. It's completely ridiculous and fabricated if you think about it. Like it's a human construct. Like there's an economy on one side of a piece of land or one side of a river that does A, and on the other side it does B, right? And the most amazing thing that happened to me from when I was young was that when I was a teenager, the internet was just coming to bear, right? And so the internet has made everything available to everyone. And that's been the great level of the world. And what you really need to do now is make finance level the world, right? And the reality is the opportunity we have living in Singapore is dramatically different to the opportunity that 3/4 of the world has, right? And so that's why it's so important to go and build a global consumer bank that is built on crypto rails, because I think that's the only real way to do it, that levels that playing field for everyone, right? That's what I really care about. That's what the whole of the Cast organization cares about. Some things we do well. Sometimes, I woke up this morning to someone shit posting about, our customer service or something else, and people complain. But our intent is good. Our intent is to level the playing field and make global consumer banking, maybe business banking, available to everyone in a very easy user experience. The scale of the opportunity is huge, but at the same time, delivering that to people is far more important. And whatever wealth I may generate from it, will get donated, and I'll die one day anyway. So
this is a very,
that bit doesn't really matter to me.
This is a very chill attitude to take after somebody who was early at Circle, and the Circle IPO just went absolutely gangbusters. It becomes very easy to be like, oh, you're in that, oh, money doesn't matter, guys, phase of your life now. That's only rich people talk like that, Rags.
No, well, I mean, I had money before Circle, and it's not that I'm mega rich, right? But I'm enough that I can pick what I do in life.
Yeah.
And I've got to that stage, luckily, right?
That's awesome.
And so the good thing about that is that I don't have to take money from a VC because I need to. I don't have to listen to what people think is my view of how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
I can have completely independent thinking because honestly, like, what I always wanted in life was a house on the beach. And I've got a house on the beach where I live right now. And every day I go out and I go for a run on the beach, and it's amazing. And if I lost everything and I still had this house and I'm still near the beach, I could literally, go for a run every day and breathe the fresh air, and I'd be super happy.
I'm there. I'm there as well. Only in Bali though. I can't afford it. I can't do this in many other places in the world. But
you get it. Then you get it, right? Like, as soon as you stop caring about trying to keep up with the Joneses. Like, last week, Circle IPO'd, and yes, I made a nice amount of coin on paper. By the way, it's still, I can't sell it or anything.
Oh, really?
6 months or so.
Okay.
Yeah, because all the employees are all locked up. So,
I'm sure.
But literally,
you'll be fine.
Yeah, literally, I was in a mall that day, and I was like, oh, should I buy myself something nice? And I didn't. I just bought myself strawberries, chocolate dipped strawberries. That's what I did buy. They were amazing. And I was like, I just didn't find the need to celebrate buying anything.
Yeah, that's a wonderful place to be in your life. Dude, I want to close out. You said something earlier that I want to ask you about, which was about Bitcoin. And I guess I kind of wonder, I think you're going to you probably have a bias on this, but I'll ask you anyway. Do you see, so as we get more consumer applications available using crypto rails, like what you guys are doing with Kast, I can't help but wonder do you think there could be a shift away from stablecoins towards Bitcoin being the base asset that everybody wants to be in?
Yes, in short. And so I'm rewriting my vision paper for Kast. And the vision paper is a 25-year vision, and I've laid this out multiple times before. Stablecoins are basically a gateway drug to Bitcoin.
Yeah,
so essentially, you're going to have hybrid for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And then you would have a period through the 2030s where stablecoins are really big. But in that time, Bitcoin gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know if it'll catch gold, but it'll become very big. And remember, between the 1920s and 1970s, all money, real money, like US dollars, was gold. It's 100% backed by gold. Every US dollar had gold sitting in Fort Knox. They actually seized gold from everyone and they stuck behind it, right? Then they decoupled it, and now currency is independent of gold. But what's going to happen is that maybe the US will keep printing US dollars. And that's what stablecoins are largely built off. 99% are today. But what's going to happen is that eventually people and currencies, and the US is 25% of the world economy, maybe it'll become 20% or 15%. And the other 85% are like, hey, what do we we need to back our currency on something. And imagine all these emerging markets who are using dollars extensively. My view is that they're going to build something that's backed by Bitcoin, or maybe backed by a basket of things like gold, Bitcoin, dollars. I've actually
Ethereum.
got this
You think
called,
any Ethereum?
for Charles' sake, I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. You were saying about the basket.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a paper on this thing called the bull dollar. The bull dollar is a composition of the two biggest currencies, the dollars, euros, as well as gold and Bitcoin. And I think that could make, some sort of a basket like that could be interesting. Or maybe eventually in the 2040s and so forth, people will just go, I'll just back a currency fully on Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
One interesting thing you got to remember that every Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Bitcoin reaches $1 million, you can divide it by 1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every Satoshi would be 1 cent,
mm-hmm.
right? So the divisibility is built into Bitcoin, where it could get very, very interesting, where people are just like, hey, I've got Bitcoin dollars. And that's also a concept in a white paper that I've written before, the concept of a Bitcoin dollar. It's just really hard numerically to go, oh, Bitcoin is worth X. I've got 0.00. But if you've got a Bitcoin dollar and you're like, oh, the Bitcoin's at $1 million today, but a Bitcoin dollar is $1 to the US dollar. That's really easy to understand. And I think at that point, it's going to fluctuate a lot less as well. So to fluctuate very similar to other currencies, and then people go, fuck it, I'm going to hold a Bitcoin dollar because it's backed by Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, to fully answer your question, I believe that we're going to be in stablecoins for the next 15 years. Bitcoin's going to be doing its thing, and then we're going to see some really strong Bitcoin-backed currencies emerge. In like the 20, maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, man. Dude, I'm glad you said that, and I have to say I totally agree. And but it does. I think you're probably right about the timeline as well, and which makes me think a little bit about, because I will tell you that I tend to spend most of my time thinking about Bitcoin, and yeah, but you're right. Like we're probably 15 years away from, greater adoption in terms of Bitcoin as really a base asset in that way. So, yeah. So maybe
it just needs to get bigger. It's only 2 trillion today, right? It's not even an Nvidia or a Microsoft, right? So it needs to get to like 10 or 20 trillion. And then it's like way bigger than a company. And then it's like,
what's gold? Gold is 15 trillion.
I think it's like 20 trillion or so now. I think it was 17 when I was in the high 2000s. So I think it's about 20 now.
Yeah. So that's probably the next. Hopefully it gets there. I have a lot of Bitcoin, so that would be nice.
Don't sell that shit. Borrow against it and spend it, but don't sell it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. Rags, really great to have you on here, man. And again, thank you so much for the support. Very excited to see what happens with Kast. And look forward to catching up with you next time we're in the same city.
Cool, man. Promise. Thank you.